Hello, and welcome to the Soccernomics Podcast, the home of football economics. My name's George Lyons, and every Friday I'll be joined by a special guest from all areas of the footballing world, along with our own team of expert journalists from the Soccernomics website, where we'll be delving into the economical, financial, business, and legal matters behind the beautiful game that we all love. If you're a fan of football and want to get to know more about what goes on behind the scenes of your club, or the impacts that football has on the economy and vice versa, continue listening and consider subscribing to us on YouTube and Spotify. If you're a football fanatic and weekly podcasts just aren't enough, head over to our website, soccernomics.net, where you can find more in-depth articles on all the latest topics in football economics, written by myself and our brilliant team of journalists. Today I was joined by our latest member of the Soccernomics team, and I'm very, very excited to introduce you guys to him. It's Cameron Basnec. Cameron has recently graduated from Adelaide University with a Bachelor of Commerce, majoring in management. He's also soon to begin his Masters in International Management, and he actually has a lot of involvement in soccer as well around Adelaide. So he actually started up and is still currently the president of the Old Concordian Soccer Club in the Collegiate League in South Australia. Basically, he and a couple of his mates started the team together and basically built it up from the bottom, and they recently got promoted this season, and it's a very, very exciting little project that they've got going on. And it just goes to show his skills that he has and how he can implement those in real life situations, especially in football. On today's episode, we were talking about the A-League transfer system and why it is so flawed and why it's actually limiting the game in Australia. It's not just the A-League, it actually trickles down all the way down to the rest of the Football League system in Australia. Just saying what we can do to try and make a difference. There has been some actual activity in the real world of where the FFA, or the Football Federation of Australia, has been looking to try and make changes to try and improve the transfer economy in Australia. But this is just to go to show what is actually going wrong and why football is actually stagnating in Australia, and why the league isn't actually growing as much as we thought it might have been 15 years ago. I hope you enjoy this one, guys. If you haven't already, check out Cameron's article that he's written. It's probably our most read article on the website, so we've had a lot of awesome feedback. It has gone a little bit viral. Check it out on the Soccernomics.net website, and I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Alright, I'm going to stop talking. Let's get into it. What's up, guys? George Lyons here. Welcome back to the Soccernomics Podcast, where today I'm joined with our very own Cameron Basnec. How are you, man?
Yeah, very good. How are you?
Very, very good. Very, very good. It's to a lot of you guys, you'd see that Cameron is a new face. That is because he is a new face. So welcome to the team, Cameron.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me.
You weren't expecting me to say that, were you?
Good to be here.
Yeah, no, excellent. And today we're going to be talking about Cameron's debut article, which is the A-League transfer system and why it's broken. We got a lot of good feedback on this article, like smashed it straight away.
Popular topic, obviously.
Yeah, very, very popular topic, obviously very close to home, and obviously a touchy subject for some. But yeah, basically a quick rundown of what's going on. Something has to change in the Australian Football Federation and the way they've structured it, right?
So the way really that our football system is set up, just for those that aren't aware, if you're from international audience, got the
Good
camera
start.
right already.
That's it.
So it is kind of similar to the English sort of football pyramid setup. So we have our top league, which is the A-League.
Mm-hmm.
That consists of, I should know that, 10, 12 teams.
I don't even know. There's a new team every year now.
There's a couple joining soon. You've got MacArthur's joining in. You've got Western United joined last season. Joined.
Nice.
So it's expanding, but it's still quite small. It would be roughly half the size of the Premier League.
Yeah, and the season doesn't go for very long. The teams usually play each other more than twice sometimes.
Yeah, you play them normally about 3 times, I think. And then you have a finals series, so that's sort of similar to the American model.
Yeah.
Where you have your finals playoff tournament. So you have your first past the post type, season champion.
Yeah.
And then you have the more prestigious grand final winner. Which is more of just an Australian thing. Yeah,
I was going to say, when I first moved to Australia, I was like, I don't like the finals system, because it's like, why would you celebrate winning a one-off tournament between 6 teams as opposed to, hey, we've been the best throughout the entire year?
Well, that's the funny thing as well. The fact that it's from 6 teams and the original A-League had 10 teams.
Yeah.
So it meant that you could finish in the bottom half of the league and go through to the grand final and win it, technically.
And it would have been so volatile back then as well.
I'm sure there's a few Premier League fans that would like that,
Oh.
mid-table clubs getting into the finals and winning.
100%. Sounds something like Man United just coming back on the back end of the season.
Yeah, a good underdog story.
Good underdog story, yeah. Little teams like Man United.
But yeah, so under the A-League, you have what's called the National Premier League.
Yep.
The best way I can describe this is non-league football for the UK viewers.
Yeah.
So it's made up of a numerous amount of different levels of leagues that fall under the National Premier League banner. So you have like NPL 1, 2, 3, all the way down to whatever it is for each different Australian state.
Mm-hmm.
So you have NPL ACT for the Canberra, New South Wales again. You have a northern one, so they just have a lot of leagues. Queensland, South Australia, Tasmania, Victoria, and Western Australia, and they all have different like levels.
Yeah.
So for example, South Australia has a NPL 1.
Yeah.
They have a state league, which is the one under that. They have a state league 2, and then it goes into what's called regional leagues, which is really just sort of semi-professional, social, like your Sunday league almost type.
Yeah.
In comparison, NPL Victoria has a further 9, so including the top league. So there's the A League, and there's 9 Victorian levels.
Of course they do. They always have to be better than everyone else.
Yes. One of the smallest states with the most people.
No, I hate it.
Most like England.
It very much. Victoria is basically England. Melbourne is like Manchester. It rains all the time, and it's just not great. But carry on.
So it's after you have your A League, it gets very sort of similar to the conference level, where you're technically on the same level, but you have different competitions in different parts of the different parts of the country.
That's essentially because like it becomes very expensive to travel around, that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
I mean, you can imagine in conference it's hard to get around anyway in the UK. Imagine in a country the size of Australia, like it'd be pretty hard for a team to
if you've got
travel
a team
around.
in Western Australia and they have to play a team in Sydney, that's like travelling across the UK like 3-4 times just to get to the game and then come back as well.
Yeah. Not fun.
Yeah, so it's quite a big country, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But in saying that, you might be asking, well, why is it called a National Premier League when you don't really play anyone else for another state?
Yeah.
They do have, in typical Australian fashion, a final series.
Ah.
So the winner of the NPL 1, top second division, they go into a national tournament.
Right.
And then they become the NPL winners of the national tournament thing.
Hey.
So that's how they sort of get the national part. And the interesting thing with Australian football is the lack of promotion and relegation between the very top, the A-League, and everything below that. So everything below A-League has promotion and relegation, to an extent. Different leagues, like when you get to your regional leagues, for example, in South Australia, we have the Collegiate League. That has its own promotion and relegation between its own divisions, but there's no stepping stone up to the NPL from there. But in all the NPL leagues, they have promotion and relegation, so you can go from NPL Victoria 6, get on a good winning streak and nice big road to glory.
That'd be good. That'd be good.
Your FIFA and FM players like.
That's it.
And you could theoretically make it up to NPL Victoria 1.
Yep.
But you can't go any further. You can't get into the A-League.
It's so weird. I don't understand. Because it's like, why are you stopping us from achieving greatness?
It's similar to the MLS thing of like an expansion.
Yeah.
So it actually costs money to go in, or you have to provide a sort of business plan or business case to go in.
Okay, right.
So originally it was started with 10 teams to have at least one team in every state, except for Tasmania.
Right.
Because they're not a state, apparently. According
Ow.
to in the eyes of the FFA, that must have been the thinking.
That's it. They just didn't want to go there.
So it was sort of like a franchise system, similar to a lot of other Australian sports like rugby, Australian rules football. They saw having a team in every different state, to be able to try and capture as much of the fan base as they could. And since then, it was very stagnant. There was no growth. There was no extra teams coming in until pretty recently. A couple of teams folded.
Yeah.
You had your
North Queensland Fury.
That's the one.
That's it. I remember those. And then was there another one? Because North Queensland
Gold Coast United.
That's the one. I was going to say that was the one with Shane Smelts.
Yes.
And Joel Porter. Joel Porter used to be my coach. Hey.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I know. But
brag.
Brag. Yeah. It's a
But
flex.
yeah, so
nah, definitely.
with those teams folding, they had to obviously bring in new teams. So teams like Western Sydney United, who quite famously ended up winning the Asian Champions League.
Mm-hmm.
So the Asian Confederation's version of the UEFA Champions League.
Mm-hmm.
And they they're the first and only Australian team to win it.
That's massive. It was massive when it happened. I remember.
Yeah, and
they'd
only been in existence for a couple of years because they weren't like an NPL club that they brought up and allowed to join. They were a completely new club formed, from scratch essentially. So it was a really amazing achievement.
Huge. They had like Aaron Moy. They had Aaron Moy in their team.
Now a
Great player.
now a Brighton legend.
That's it.
Some may say.
Absolutely. So pretty much we've got this system down packed. What's wrong with it?
Well, unfortunately, the player movement between these leagues is not quite. It's very complicated.
Right.
So the A League itself will start there.
Yeah.
Start at the top. So if, example, we'll say you're, Melbourne Victory.
Yep. Okay.
And I'm Adelaide United.
Okay.
You've got, a striker that I wanna have. He's pretty good. Normally, let's say we're in the Premier League, I would just make a transfer offer.
Yeah.
Let's say 2 million. To you.
2 mil.
To say, I want to buy him. Then we'll, negotiate throughout the contract.
Contracts. Yeah.
It's pretty straightforward. In the A League, you can't do that. You cannot offer another A League club a transfer fee. Everything is done from free agency, and so players running off of contracts and they're moving for free.
I don't get it. I'm as shocked as you are because to me that makes no sense.
And once again, that's just an Australian thing. Look at the AFL.
Yeah.
They only recently introduced free agency.
Did they?
I'm pretty sure. I don't follow the AFL. Oh, hands up, an Australian doesn't really follow the AFL. But they had some change to their free agency rules not too long ago.
Right.
Yeah, so it's a pretty Australian thing. It's pretty foreign to a lot of, foreign viewers.
Yeah, definitely. I see. I can understand why they would have implemented that rule at the very start of the A League because it was like, okay, this is going to be very volatile. The rich are going to just take the good players.
Yeah.
And like we haven't quite got the attraction yet to bring in the players to make sure that it's an equal divide. But it's been a long time. Like it's been what, like 15 years?
15 years, yes.
Yeah.
And yeah, so in addition to that, you have a salary cap. I can't remember the exact number. I think it's 3.2 million.
Okay.
But there's also a price floor on that. So each team has to spend at least, I think it's 95% of that.
Oh.
Each year on wages. So that gets allocated to the teams from the FFA, the governing bodies. Who, UK's FA, we have FFA.
Yeah. How original.
Just to make it, a bit confused. Bit of a tongue twister, really. So they get allocated the money from the TV deals they have for the league. Yeah. And then they use that money to give the clubs to, with that salary cap.
Right.
Now, this is where it gets a bit confusing. So there are certain, similar to like homegrown players in the UK, how you have to have like a certain amount of them. It's similar here. Yeah. You need to have a certain amount. But then you have what's called a marquee player. So they can be paid outside of the salary cap. So that's where it gets really interesting, where you have your divide between your poorer and your richer clubs. Yeah. Because if you haven't got the money, you can't afford an Alessandro Del Piero like Sydney FC did.
I can't believe they got him. That's cool. Or Emil Heskey, obviously.
Emil Heskey. Oh, don't knock. We also had Romario.
We had Romario
to play for Adelaide United. When he was about 60. William Gallas played for Perth.
Yeah, I remember that.
Couple of big names.
Yeah. David Villa.
Yeah, David Villa for Melbourne City for about 3 seconds.
He was literally there for like 2 games, wasn't he?
2 games while he was getting ready to play for New York City.
Yeah. God, they're cheap, aren't they? Absolutely cheap.
That's another That's another article, maybe.
Yeah, let's do that. Why we are so.
But yeah, so you have your marquee spot. I think it's 1 or 2. I can't quite remember. But they recently introduced a additional marquee spot.
Okay.
This was sort of affectionately known as the Tim Cahill rule, because it was Melbourne City. So everyone's aware of the City Group. So this is their Melbourne team.
Yeah.
They wanted to bring in another marquee. So they already had a striker called Bruno Fornaroli, who was a fantastic striker for them, just banging in goals.
Very good Uruguayan.
Very good international player, which we'll get onto in a sec. But,
yes.
They didn't have room in the salary cap to pay Timmy Cahill.
Right.
The joke was that he wanted to join a club with a vision, with dollar signs.
100%.
But so Melbourne City lobbied the FFA, and one thing led to another, and there was a new rule implemented that the FFA will allow you to have an extra marquee player if they meet certain criteria. So if they're going to raise the standards of the game, so like a Del Piero or a Tim Cahill, one of Australia's greatest ever players. I believe our top goal scorer internationally.
I think he is.
If not, he's up there. Pretty recognisable face. Yeah. So raising the status of the game, because that is a big objective of the FFA, is to try and increase fan attendance to games. We're in a very saturated sports market here, so that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%.
Unfortunately, though, from what we saw in the following years, is that rule was used to just not allow anyone else to bring in extra marquee players. Yeah. So, for example, I just got this up before we came here, just so I remember his name. Luca Toni. So Adelaide United wanted to bring in Luca Toni using this rule. They already had Eugene Galakovic was their marquee player.
Really?
Yeah.
He was that marquee player?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Best keeper in the league.
Oh, no, he is.
Australian Buffon. Yeah,
he is. He's single-handedly.
So, we had him as our marquee to try and keep him. But so we also wanted to bring in Luca Toni. Now, for those that don't know, Luca Toni, I have his career stats here from Wikipedia. Nice and trustworthy. But 586 games, 268 goals.
Wow.
Played for a lot of teams in Italy. But Brescia, Palermo, Fiorentina, Genoa, Juventus.
Yeah. The main one was Bayern Munich, though.
Bayern Munich, though, yes. 2007 and 2010, Bayern Munich, 60 appearances, 38 goals. But not to mention, he was obviously a bit older, being a smaller league, you do tend to attract bigger stars when they're sort of coming to the end. Yeah. Your retirement league.
Yeah.
But, you've got to do what you got to do.
That's it.
But he was coming off the back of playing at Verona, where he had played 95 games and scored 48 goals. And he'd only been there for 3 years.
Wow. And one of those seasons he got joint golden boot with Higuain.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah.
So he was still banging in goals. He was no slouch.
No, not at all.
But he didn't meet the FFA standard for raising the quality of the game in Australia.
Oh my God.
Serie A golden boot winner within the last couple of years wasn't good enough. So that's where sort of a lot of these sort of rules, you can see the sort of thinking behind them to try and equalise the playing field.
Yeah.
But in reality, over time, you can sort of see the discrepancies and why it's not working. And so we mentioned all this is a long-winded way of saying that although there's a lot of regulation in place for a reason, the objective that they're trying to get, which is to level the playing field, it isn't working. So why should we keep these other regulations that are just hampering the development of the entire football community really in Australia?
Yeah, and that's a general feel, isn't it? Around Australia and A-League fans, is that these rules are literally stunting the growth of the sport in Australia, but also the league's growth. And it's not just the A-League; it's also the teams, like you said, that are lower down. Even though they can't get into the A-League, everything trickles down to them. There's a knock-on effect that goes on because, if you can't attract players to come over, how are you supposed to improve the game?
And even all the way up to the national team.
Yeah.
National teams are a great way to engage fans. World Cup time, countries see massive increases in fan engagement and fan interest in the sport. When Australia, made it to the quarterfinals, the 2006 World Cup, didn't go so well against Italy, but you'd think we were a soccer country. The amount of fan engagement and just people that hop on because it's like, right, well, we're passionate about our country, especially in sport. It's very big here in Australia.
It is.
The amount of people that's hopped on, started supporting the national team, that's a golden opportunity to get people involved in the sport and following the sport, playing the sport, watching the sport. But if your national team is not very good, it's pretty hard to convince people that this is a sport worthwhile to invest their time in. Yeah,
but the 2006 squad was amazing.
Our golden generation.
Dead set, but man, the whole reason why the Australian national team is not as good, or there isn't as many big household names these days, is it's actually a direct result of these rules and the actual domestic side of things, like everything down to the Australian Institute of Sport and all that sort of stuff. Obviously, that's going to get onto like a complete different tangent, but
we'll get into that in a sec. But to finish off the transfer regulations, you obviously have a loan system. You can't loan players over the age of 23 between A-League clubs, and you're only allowed 2. So you can't loan out more than 2, and you can't loan in more than 2.
Oh my god.
There is then the international cap. So there's a cap on how many international players you can have, which is 5, which is fine. You want to bring in international players that have a bit of flair, or just higher. Like Luca Toni has an experience of playing at the highest level of the game that the world can offer.
Yeah.
That experience is invaluable to players that have never been able to leave the country to play. It's a great way to improve the standard. Improves coaching, improves everything. Yeah. But at the same time, you still want to give Australian players and young players playtime with those players.
100%.
Now, interestingly, if an A-League club was to sell a player internationally, so say Aaron Moy, for example, he went from, this is a bit of a bad example, but
because his own
Matt Ryan, Brighton's current keeper, when he went from, I believe it was Central Coast Mariners, he went to Club Bruges over in Belgium. They would have received a transfer fee for that. Yeah. But if they had sold him to Melbourne Victory or another A-League club, they wouldn't. They would have had to wait until his contract ran out, or he could have just complained really and just said, I don't want to play for you anymore, and they would mutually end the contract, which happens. He would just go for free, and that'd be down a first choice keeper who, as we've his Premier League quality we've now seen. Yeah,
he's a great goalkeeper. He's a fantasy team favourite as well, isn't he?
And they get nothing for it. And it's the same. Obviously, if they want to buy a player from international, like they want to buy a player from Europe, like a marquee player, international player, they obviously pay a transfer fee. Yeah. So that's where the sort of outside the salary cap things come in. Yeah. Where the bigger teams can still afford to get the better imports, the better marquee players in. And as you see, like the clubs that win the league most of the time are your Sydneys, your Melbournes, even your Brisbanes for one stage that just have incredible imports compared to the rest of the league. Yeah. Sydney had Del Piero.
We could never get Del Piero.
Exactly.
Never. This is like what the real problem is with that transfer fee thing. So obviously there's other issues with the transfer system. The problem with this one in particular is there's no incentive of keeping quality players in the league. Unless they're going to stay at their club, because if a club knows that they've got a quality player, they're either going to try and keep him there because they're not going to make any money from him selling him to within the league system.
Yeah, exactly.
They're going to sell him internationally, but not only are they going to receive a fee that's going to make them way more competitive compared to everyone in the system, but that player is no longer playing in Australia.
And while that's good for the player, because evidently the quality of coaching, often is very high compared to what we have here internationally. It doesn't help improve the game domestically. No. And if we can bring the level of the domestic play, domestic coaches up, that's when we can compete on a national stage.
100%. All the best leagues in the world are from the best countries in the world.
Exactly. And the whole idea of the salary cap trying to even the playing field out. Unfortunately, if you look at the winners of the last 15 A-League seasons, there is only a handful of teams that have actually won it. And that gets even smaller when you think about teams that have won it more than once. So I believe Sydney have won it 4 or 5 times now. Sydney FC, that's one club.
Let's have a look. I know we've only won it once, eh?
Yeah, Adelaide United have won it once recently. I remember that. It was my 18th birthday. We won the league.
Really?
Very good day.
What a day. I remember that day too. Got hammered.
First time gone to a pub legally.
Love that. So Sydney's won it the most times, 5 times.
There you go. So that's a third of the league's existence been won by one team in a league that's meant to be, fair and competitive.
Yeah, it's supposed to be. But hey, capitalism finds a way. Even though it's not the capital.
But yeah,
Sydney's not the capital of Australia, people. No, neither is Melbourne.
It's a very tiny microstate type thing called Canberra.
Yes, that's right.
Which is inside New South Wales.
yeah. It's inside. It's got its own state inside of a state.
Think Vatican City.
Yeah. Hey, I never thought about it like that. That'd be great.
So basically, although there's the lack of transfer fee ability for clubs domestically, and the idea of that, so you don't obviously have your Sydney FC, who are probably one of the richest clubs in Australia, just saying, right, good player from a smaller club, we'll pay you money and you come over here.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is, though, these players are leaving the smaller clubs anyway, because if they can't go to Europe and they can't win a championship or a league with their current club, they want to, as a player, you want to win stuff. Like
100%.
Although you play for the love of the game, you still want to, winning is still important, especially at a professional level.
We ain't Tottenham.
If you are offered a contract by a bigger club, you will just run down your contract, or you would just ask for it to be mutually terminated by a club and go play with them anyway. That's
what happened with Bruce Kamau, isn't it? For Adelaide United after we won the final. He was like, well, I want to go play for a bigger club. Melbourne City's offering me money.
Exactly.
Can I go?
Exactly. No, it makes it hard for smaller clubs to actually hold on to players, and it also makes it hard for them to sort of financially bring in new players. And although they've lost the player on the free, they can then get a player back on the free. Most of the time you're getting aging players, you're getting older players, and this is what's referred to as the A-League merry-go-round of players. It's just the same players circulating back and forth.
100%.
They get, go to one club, don't work out, so then go to another club, or they, might do something well there, they go to another club. There's very rarely a fresh injection of new players, which would potentially come from the NPL, the lower leagues.
Yeah, the NPL is great. The NPL is actually really good.
And the FFA Cup, so our version of the FA Cup, has really highlighted that. There has often been, your giant killer stories, just like the FA Cup. You have your small league teams going on insane cup runs.
Yeah.
We even had, Adelaide United had an emergency loan from, I believe it was Blacktown City, for a player called Danny Choi.
I remember him. He was great.
He became a cult hero in Adelaide. Young winger.
Yeah.
Very quick, very skillful. Played unbelievable for us. Now, unfortunately, we didn't end up signing him. Or making that move permanent. But he played a handful of games for us just in the cup. We were so injury-ridden. And he was unbelievable. It was similar to, it's a bit of a high-low comparison, but Marcus Rashford, when he came into Man United, it was just that burst of youthful exuberance and, just pace, skill, determination. And he's like, right, well, I'm only going to be here for so long probably, so I might as well give it everything I've got. And it's unbelievable.
He was great. I miss that guy.
And, you can just see that there's so much quality in the NPL. Recently, so Adelaide United signed, what's his name now? Their centre-back, Gregory Timotheu?
Timothy, I don't know. So honestly, I've been real out of it.
So he was playing for an NPL Victoria team and was picked up by Schalke, I believe, in the Bundesliga. Played minutes for Schalke. Obviously wasn't, tearing up the Bundesliga, but the fact that Schalke thought he had potential, he was good enough for them to invest money into.
One of the best youth systems in the world, by the way, Schalke.
But no A-League team thought he was good enough. They didn't think he was experienced enough. Didn't think he was, physically, technically good enough. So A-League passing up on a player. Bundesliga thinks they're good enough.
Yeah.
And now, funnily enough, Adelaide United have paid money to have him now.
Yeah, paid for him.
Paid. Because the problem with NPL to A-League transfers is there actually is allowed to be transfer fees, but they're capped at 50% of what they would earn for the rest of their wage on the rest of their contract.
Excuse my language, fuck all.
No, it's crazy.
It's fucking terrible.
Obviously, if you think the lower leagues of England, like obviously A-League is not as developed as the UK's football system, which is understandable. Been around the A-League as itself has been around for 15 years. Obviously, the predecessor to that, the NSL and these clubs, a lot of have been around for ages, but there's just not the same infrastructure there. There's not the same footballing culture in Australia that facilitates that sort of growth. So although you have, teams like, we're going to say Marconi Stallions, one of the most successful, dominant teams in Australian football history. You can look before the A-League was started, you had the NSL, which is what... The A-League is essentially the Premier League, how it was formed as a commercial deal on top of the pre-existing, First Division. So that's sort of what the NSL was. But here the NSL was dissolved and then it ended up becoming the NPL, which was then split up into different states. So it's a bit confusing, but the article does explain that a bit if this is a bit long-winded.
Yes, definitely. We'll have the link down below. Don't worry. And definitely check it out. But it's it's weird, isn't it? Because there's the hampering the growth, but also where is the incentive? Because as you said, the actual what's the most an NPL team has actually received in terms of a transfer fee? Because like wages are actually quite a lot. Anyway.
Yeah, well, so unfortunately, there isn't much information on that. Like transfer market obviously doesn't go down to NPL.
Yeah.
But the wages aren't much. Like a lot of these clubs, they, especially in NPL 1, the bigger clubs, they're actually part of a bigger social club. So originally with Australian soccer, it was a very ethnically like
divided, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, like a club would be the centre of an ethnic community within a group. So there's always a big Croatian population in a certain area, or a big Greek or a big Italian. So Sydney FC, its predecessor was Sydney Croatia. So that was the Croatian club. Here in Adelaide, there's Adelaide Raiders, which is the Croatian club. Yeah. You have your Greek and Italian clubs, and that's how it always was. And so there was sort of the real community, centre for those communities. And that's how a lot of them still are. These NPL clubs.
They still are, yeah.
And so they have their social clubs. They might have, other clubs are there, but so they can raise a lot more money, but they've still obviously got to run these other things.
Yeah. The fee, like the actual costs of running a soccer club in Australia is huge. It's huge. It's ridiculous.
Not to mention just the lack of infrastructure there is here. There isn't anything outside of A-League. There isn't going to be a stadium with more than 10,000. I'm not off the top of my head. I can think of an NPL club.
No, like not even. You'd do good to get 1,000 people.
Obviously, some games, big derbies between a lot of traditional rivals, maybe.
Yeah.
But it's a lot less developed, obviously.
Yeah.
So the compensation these teams get really is not much.
Yeah.
Which is why, unfortunately, the clubs end up having to pay having to charge players to pay. So obviously their first team players, they don't charge because they pay them normally.
Yeah.
Reserve team pays maybe, but it falls to the burden on the juniors. And that's a real problem with Australia, is the accessibility, the pay-to-play system that we have. Teams are charging upwards of 1,000, 1,500, some maybe even $2,000 a season for kids to play for them.
For kids.
And obviously the parents are paying that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, the kids have to do it out of their birthday
unless you can get a scholarship, or you show that you're good enough that they'll invest money into you, you can't play. So that locks out a pretty huge, that's a lot of money.
Huge, given the fact that they're, like you said, sport in Australia is so saturated, and sports like AFL or
rugby, cricket, tennis,
all of these are much cheaper to play. People who generally play soccer play it for life in Australia because they do it because they love it. It's not just a fact that they happen to start playing it and they happen to be good at it. It's like they'll play because they love it. That's why, because they have to pay so much to have to play.
It really is crazy.
It's ridiculous. I find it so weird because it instantly decreases your catchment of players.
And it turns into an almost sort of elitist sport because, if you're playing at a club from, let's say under 8s, and you're playing all the way up, and let's say, you play for the club your whole life, you start at, like, say, you're under 8s, you play all the way up, you go, 9s, 10s, 11s, 12s, 13s, 15s, 16s, 18s, reserves and onwards, right?
Yeah.
You might be playing there for 7-8 years before you make you sign like a semi-professional contract. That's 10-15 grand to play soccer.
To play soccer for fun.
Yeah,
I wouldn't do it.
It's crazy.
If I was playing junior soccer, I wouldn't have played.
Yeah.
Would not have been here. I would not have played. I would have played AFL. I probably would have. Yeah, played rugby, light rugby, even though it's not really big in South Australia.
And surprisingly, despite that, it's still the most participated sport in the country.
It is.
Like, it's crazy.
They just love. Australia loves soccer. They love it. I'm getting a lot. I'll get a lot of stick for calling it soccer. Australia loves football. They love football, but man, like, give them a break. Like, the kids shouldn't be paying that much. If anything, like. It's very backwards to the UK. Obviously, there is a registration fee because you have to. Like, there's heaps of things around the back. But like, the idea is that, like, the owners pay, the community pays. That's what the whole point of having a football club. It's a business. If you're making your employees pay to work for you, like, well, of course not. That's not going to work unless they love the work that much.
And unfortunately, the clubs, obviously, they'll develop these players, these young kids, all the way up, and hopefully the aim is that they'll play for them and be good and win them titles. Yeah. But when say an A-League club might come calling, like, for example, Marconi this year is set to lose 10 first team players to various A-League clubs. So I think Sydney FC, the Western Sydney, and I believe one of the Melbourne teams. A total of 10 players they're going to lose.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they don't hold a grudge.
No.
They think it's great. You're moving up to a higher level. It brings prestige to their club. They can say, look, we produced X amount of national team players. We produced X amount of A-League players. You know, this bloke, player A, now plays in Germany.
Yeah.
Join us because we'll...
Make you better.
We can make you to that level. But they don't get compensated for that. So they put in all this time and work. They have, you know, volunteer coaches. Maybe they pay the coaches depending on what level they're at. But all this time and work, produce this kid from maybe, you know, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, all the way up to maybe 18, 19, 20. And then they sign their, you know, pro deal. They're happy for them. But then they're out of pocket normally. You know, they don't get compensated for it.
Yeah.
So, for example, if they were allowed... You know, even if it was $200,000, that's the registration for, you know, a whole year, probably all their junior teams.
Yeah.
That they could waive from one player being sold. And it's the same with the A-League. You know, big club buys good player from smaller club. Okay, they lose the good player, but they get compensated.
Yeah.
They get to reinvest that. They could reinvest that in maybe 2, you know, young players. Similar to like an Ajax thing.
Yeah.
You know, people call them a selling club, but they made the Champions League final or semi-final.
Yeah.
The other year, they've won the European, you know, championships multiple times.
They're making the most of their resources.
Exactly.
And excelling.
So I think that's really the main thing that is missing from Australian football.
Yeah.
Is the sort of capital mobility between the big and small clubs, and that trickling down to the smaller, you know, MPL systems and stuff like that.
Yeah. It would be nice to say that they received a fee of $200,000 for an MPL player. Like that would seem quite fair. Like that would do so much for the club.
Yeah,
it isn't that much.
But
it's not that much.
Maybe it said like obviously your Marconis, right? They're a pretty big club. They I did read their financial reports when I'm writing this article, and they do revenue is pretty solid.
It's
right?
pretty solid. That's good.
But
that's good.
They
I want to know that.
They still can't afford to pay players, you know, 100, 200 grand a year. Not to mention clubs lower than that. You know, nowhere near. I've got the facility like. The highest level I played at was under 18 through a State League 2 club. So I was at the bottom level below your sort of social level for South Australia.
Yeah. What team?
Sturt Lions.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I would have played against you. Probably.
I do remember a 10 o'clock kickoff at Port Pirie. Leaving the house at 5 a.m.
Oh, no. I had to do that every
club
week.
Was mainly run on volunteers.
Yeah, same. All volunteers. No one was paid.
I believe maybe some of the first team players maybe were paid,
yeah.
But that would have been substituted with them actually having a working role in the club. So I believe when I was there, I was under 18's goalkeeper, and we brought in a new first team goalkeeper from another club, and so I believe he was paid. I'm not, you know, I won't say any names obviously, but I believe he was paid, but that was because then he also picked up the role as the goalkeeping coach for the club.
Right.
So he had to work to get paid there.
Yeah.
You know, which is, you know, it's fine.
Makes sense.
You know, say somehow one of our keepers went to the A-League or got purchased by, you know, say a bigger NPL club.
Yeah.
Maybe we'd get $500.
Yeah, it's nothing, eh?
Yeah, and like
that's not going to get very far.
That was less than I paid in Reggio for my under 18 season.
Yeah, it's
like it's
messed
crazy.
up. It's messed up. So pretty much the idea behind what we're trying to say here, like put it in a nutshell, there is very little incentive for these lower teams to produce these youth players, which was what they were built upon back in the day before the A-League started. That is why we actually had such a good national team, because it was before then.
Yeah,
there was this like normal league system where like there was transfers, there was an incentive to produce high quality players. Those players went off to Europe, like amazing. Like that became a real pride of the clubs and the communities around them. It was like right, so you know. I remember, I think it was Joseph Skoko. Yeah, I remember him. He was at
talking about
Reading.
I believe so, yes. He was a Socceroos defender, and he was saying, you know, how Croatian clubs, you know, him being from Croatian descent, I believe it was him. So it looked really bad if I am Croatian.
No pressure.
But he was saying that Croatian community clubs have developed the most players for the national team. Obviously, I can't fact check if that's true. I'm just going off what he said, but that is a massive source of pride for, you know, the clubs and the community. that's something that that's their selling point.
Yeah, that's it.
Because they can't, spend money to bring in players.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's something that really, it's just a lack of circulation. Thinking about the wider economy,
Yeah.
When they say, we need to get consumer spending up to not go into recession.
Yeah.
So they want money to circulate. They want, me to spend money to you so that you spend money with, other persons. So they spend money with so-and-so and then they might buy something from me.
That's what's going on right now with the quantitative easing and all that sort of stuff,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
So it's really not like a, very abstract concept. It's literally just they've really cut the circulation of money off within the leagues, and it's really just allowed the sort of non-financial factors and appeal of clubs really to take over.
Yeah.
So clubs that win a lot, they've got more prestige. They've got more likely to keep winning. So they're going to get the better players, and it really just it really hampers the chances of smaller clubs rising up. Doing that fairy tale story, doing a Leicester.
Yeah.
Of coming from nowhere, newly promoted team. Next year they win the league. Like that's just
it doesn't happen.
Nah.
Not in Australia. And like the counter effect that this lack of incentive for teams lower down to produce players. But when they do produce players, they have to they basically have no choice but to offload them for nowhere near what their worth is to the A-League, because the A-League is obviously going to cherry pick. Why would they spend so much money developing youth talent? Of course they do it anyway. And they've got that appeal of, hey, join our youth system because you're amazing. Of course that happens. It's just the same as scouting. But hey, we'll let these guys just produce the players, and we'll just pay them this amount of money.
Exactly.
Like it's so worth it for us.
A-League clubs didn't even have academies up until recently.
It was
like,
crazy.
Unlike Brentford in England, who got rid of their academy.
Yeah.
We've only really just started having academies. We're the other way around. We've just it's crazy.
We're so behind. Australia's so behind. Like it's weird.
Like most things, but there's sort of weird hybrid between the English way of doing things and the American way of doing things. We had this sort of weird, hodgepodge amalgamation.
Yeah.
It
doesn't make any sense, man. Because there's actually been a few cases. Obviously, Aaron Moy would have been a perfect example had he have been bought by Man City, but he wasn't, because he was bought
from Man City to then be loaned to another A-League club to then be fit within the salary cap.
Yeah.
Because he's not a marquee player then.
Yeah. Long story. We won't get into that part, but pretty much it's actually very acceptable for an A-League club to scout players from the National League. And hey, let's say I remember there was a figure going a couple of years ago that like the maximum that a player really goes for from the NPL to the A-League is like $16,000.
Yeah,
I don't know if
it wouldn't be much.
It's not a lot at all. Like when I say it's not a lot, it's nothing. Like, and then this player is definitely worth more than that. Like if he's able to play professional soccer in Australia, he's definitely going to be worth more than $16,000. That's Australian dollars, not American. They can then just sell that player abroad to China or Saudi Arabia, because that's where they usually go. Of course, they go to like Europe, like Belgium and Germany is quite common.
Yeah. Leagues in Asia are normally the stepping stone a lot. So you Japan, J-League, K-League, Saudi League, Oman.
That's where our exports usually go, but they can just receive a fee, and obviously it's going to be more than 16,000. You could just literally just cherry pick the best players from the NPL and just sell them off. That's a great return on investment. Like that doesn't take long at all. But it's just wrong.
And unfortunately, really wrong. And like obviously, that is a great point. But there is regulation around that.
Good.
You have a squad size limit. It's very small.
Yeah.
I believe it's 25 players you can have in your club, registered to play.
Okay.
With I think it's 5 being internationals. 3 have to be below the age of 23, or I believe it's players that are in your reserves academy team don't count towards that. It's very complicated, but it's honestly crazy to think that they've really, these regulations were put in with the intention of helping the league sustain itself, but we're 15 years in. There's been 2 clubs fold, but that was, you could really put that down to the geographical locations. They were in Queensland, which is rugby country.
Yeah.
There is not even AFL, our national game, our probably most popular game, can really get a foothold in Queensland. So what hope does soccer have?
Not a lot.
So they've really been the only clubs that have folded. Everyone else is still going pretty strong. Like the clubs are hanging around. They're doing fine.
Yeah. Perth is good. Adelaide's fine.
Yeah, I think really now is the time that you go, right, we want to try and really improve the league, raise its standard, and try and compete. Obviously, we can't compete with Europe most of the time, but especially within the Asian Confederation, the fact that only one Australian club has ever won the Asian Champions League is crazy.
Yeah.
Like,
this is Australia.
And you compare our national teams, like our national team, generally, since... when John Aloisi's famous goal to put us into the World Cup. But since the sort of, mid to late 2000s, have made the World Cup every time. We still struggle, to beat teams from Saudi Arabia, Oman, China.
Yeah.
Melbourne Victory got slapped 3-1 by one of the bigger Chinese teams recently in the Asian Champions League.
Yeah.
And these guys aren't exactly World Cup mainstays.
No, not at all.
Like, it's crazy.
It's
but
money.
But their domestic league teams are just so much stronger. I remember when Western Sydney finally won the Asian Champions League, they played Al Hilal.
Yeah.
And they had a squad of mainly Saudi players, but had a few imports.
Mm-hmm.
But the wages that these Saudi players were paid compared to our team, it was a real David and Goliath story.
Yeah.
There was also Guaju Evergrade, I believe, in China,
Yeah.
and they had a really famous coach. I can't remember his name, but that team was like worth 100 million or something, or like they'd spent 100 million, including wages, stuff like that, on this team.
Yeah.
Compared to the A-League team, which was worth like 10.
Yeah. Wasn't a lot.
And
I don't think we've spent 100 million as a league.
No, like, it's
in
crazy.
15 years.
No.
So that says a lot. Hey, but what would you say we'd have to do to change? What do you think should change?
Well, I think the biggest thing is freeing up the transfer regulation. So the main thing, I think, would be to allow... I'd still keep the salary cap.
Mm-hmm.
I still think that's quite handy to stop,
the bigger clubs.
Yeah, the idea of a salary cap, I think, is pretty sound.
Yeah, it's sound.
Allowing transfer fees to go, so that if a smaller club does lose a player to a bigger club, because it's happening now anyway, so you may as well let them be compensated for it.
Yeah.
You may as well, and that gives the clubs more power to actually hold on to their players, because currently they're too afraid to give them a long contract.
Yeah.
They'll give maybe a 1 or 2 year deal because they think, well, they might leave. Like, and if we commit a 5-year contract to them, and they just say, no, I don't want to play anymore, I just won't play for you. Well, they're stuffed. Like,
yeah,
I want to go play for the championship winning team, that just won the Champions League, or just won the league. And they're like, well, we've got you under contract for 3, because, but I don't want to play.
And they don't. They won't play. They won't play.
So that's why you see teams and players just mutually end contracts early, which means they just don't get long-term deals, which means job security is, lower.
Yeah.
So being able to, receive a transfer fee encourages teams to actually sign players at a longer deal, so that then if they do leave, they can get compensated.
Mm-hmm.
And if the bigger clubs then do end up buying all the other players, well, okay, But then the smaller clubs then will have so much more money to invest in, whether it be, stadium upgrades, youth facilities, coaching, or a better marquee.
Yeah.
Bringing in Zlatan Ibrahimovic maybe.
Yeah.
Paying him, 150 grand a week because you've just gotten 15 million from selling, a couple of young players.
Yeah.
And the talent's there. Like, the talent in Australia is there. Awa Mabil, a former Adelaide United player, just scored a goal in the Champions League like 24 hours ago.
Yeah.
First South Australian ever in the Champions League to score a goal in the group stages.
Yes, Awa Mabil.
His team just won the Danish league.
Yeah. FC Midtjylland.
Yeah.
Check it out.
Aaron Moy, Premier League. Matt Ryan, Premier League. Schwarzer, played for Chelsea, played for Fulham, legend.
One of the greats. Mark Viduka, Harry Kewell.
Viduka, Kewell, Cahill.
Everyone.
There are so many of the quality players that we've had.
Yeah.
Not to mention the amount of players that just never get that call up from the NPL or the lower leagues, that just never have that opportunity.
Yeah. I follow, like, obviously the NPL players who go up to Adelaide United. Not recently, but I remember, like, Nikola Mila-Jusinic.
Exactly, yeah.
Pacific Nyongabio, who is incredible. Like, he's really, really good. I played against him under 18s a couple of years ago, and it was... What was it? I think it was like 9-6 or something like that. It was a fucking crazy game.
Maybe not defender.
Huh? No. I was left wing that game. I scored 2. He scored 5. It was mad. It was a mad game. No,
That's the thing.
not.
Like Adelaide United and Melbourne City is a great example. Adelaide United are the Southampton to Liverpool's to Melbourne City to Liverpool a couple of years ago. The joke 100%. Of Southampton being Liverpool's academy team essentially.
Yeah.
That's what Adelaide United are. The difference is we don't get any money for it.
No, we don't.
And we can't reinvest it. So like we've lost. We won the league and we lost our right winger. We lost the centre back. We've lost like both our fullbacks like 1,000 times to them.
Yeah. All the time. We always lose players. We actually have a really good system. Adelaide. I don't mean A-League. A-League sucks. Adelaide United's got pretty stable. But like, man, something needs to change, man. Like, it's just all it is like you said, cash is tied up. There's no incentive for teams to improve on their own side. It's always like, how can I benefit off of someone else?
And that's really been a common consensus among the Australian football community of a strong domestic competition will help improve, obviously, the standard of all our players, but also improve our national team. And that's something we take a fair bit of pride in, like as most countries. Yeah. Maybe we don't care so much until the World Cup comes on or like a tournament comes on, but when that happens, people are pretty passionate. It's it's your national team representing your country. Yeah. And no one wants to see their country get flogged.
No one does.
Although we do hold the record for the biggest win.
Yeah.
23-0 to American Samoa, I believe, or 26.
Or something big like that.
Archie Thompson scoring like 15 goals.
You'd think he was world class, wouldn't you?
Oh, crazy.
It's hilarious. But it makes sense. That was and the bottom line is that was the point of the A-League, wasn't it? To improve the domestic football league, to improve the national league. It seems to be doing the opposite. And
it's crazy. Even when we've had national team coaches who have publicly said that they want to select players that are playing in the A-League. They want to reward players playing in Australia to improve the national standard. So we had Ange Postecoglou, who won us the what's it called?
Asian Cup, right?
Yeah, our Euros essentially.
Yeah.
Won it in Australia. Amazing game, amazing tournament. Adelaide United new signing Tommy Urich with a great goal. I remember holding off about 15 blokes and then nutmeg. Yeah. Cut back, tap in.
Love it.
But yeah, so in that team, the whole point was to select players in the A-League to reward them. Currently, in the current Socceroos squad, there is 4 players that play in the A-League, and one of them is Adam Federici, who's literally he doesn't even play. He's playing for MacArthur, who joined next season, and he has never played for an A-League club, I believe.
No, he's not. He's one of those that was like.
He went from what we call the Australian Sports Institute, so like France have one where it's like a national academy of sport. Went from there to Wolverhampton Wanderers, and then bounced around England and Europe and stuff. Yeah. Played for Reading.
Yeah, I was going to say he was best known for Reading, wasn't he?
Yeah, and so he's now kind of come back. But the other ones I have in the thing.
Like Josh Risdon.
Yeah, Risdon.
Who's right back.
Mullet boy. What's his name?
I don't know.
I should know his name. He's great. Plays for Sydney FC. I'm just trying to find. Here we go. Josh Risdon, Ryan Grant. That's the mullet guy.
Okay.
Andrew Redmayne.
Goalkeeper as well.
Adam Federici. So 2 goalkeepers and 2 fullbacks.
Wow.
And those, Josh Risdon, Ryan Grant, Andrew Redmayne, predominantly Melbourne, Sydney clubs. Yeah.
And Josh Risdon's only really the one that starts, hey?
Yeah.
Because our right back game's not great.
But yeah, so that's 4 players in the entire national team squad that currently play in Australia or soon to be playing in Australia.
Yeah. There you go.
So it just really shows the state of the domestic game.
FFA, sort it out. They have made some promises to change things up a bit. I have seen that.
Yeah, they had they have a new sort of, what would the word be? It's called the starting 11. So they've gotten a bunch of ex-players. Viduka is on there.
Yeah.
Who's been a very famous, long-standing critic of the Australian game. So much so, he now lives in Croatia.
Yeah.
To get away from it.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah, they've been brought in as sort of a consulting side to improve the game.
Good.
But there's been this isn't an original idea. I can't take credit for this being an original idea.
No,
there have been so many articles written on why we need to free up transfers, or there's the big talking point of bringing in a national second division, like an A-League 2.
Yeah. Which would be great, I feel.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It'd be interesting to see how it would work, but no doubt it would improve if it could get up. it would be a massive thing. But yeah, there's a big debate about the feasibility of that at the moment.
Yeah, it's tough. We're not a small country,
but
it'd be tough.
The thirst for improvement, and like it's massive out there. There's so many people are just keen to improve it, because a lot of people, there's the term Euro snob here, which is, for example, I'm an Arsenal fan. Small club at the moment. Yeah. But obviously I still support Adelaide United, but there are plenty of people that will live in Australia the whole life and won't support an A-League club because the standard isn't very good or they don't like it, but they'll support a European club. Your Euro snob, they call them.
Yeah, I'm fine. I am a Euro snob, so it is what it is.
But yeah, the idea is to bring people as yourself.
Yeah.
Get them out to an Adelaide United game. Get them involved.
Get them there.
Because that's how we grow the game. Like we've got a massive migrant population here.
Yeah.
An expat population, that come from soccer mad countries.
Yeah.
Massive population. Well, I'm pretty sure we have the largest population of Greeks outside of Greece in Australia.
I think we do.
And I'm not going out on a limb to say Greece is a pretty big soccer country.
It is. You watched Thessaloniki? Far out. The crowds are mad.
It's crazy.
And Olympiacos fans.
But we just none of that translates to success in the domestic league. And I think these are really the main reasons: is the lack of funds to improve the game, and improve the standard. Crazy.
Right. I feel like we've pretty much covered it. Hey, that pretty much covers everything we wanted to do, mate. It's clear to see that there's room for improvement in Australia, in the A-League in particular. Hopefully everyone's watching it and something happens from this, and that we can be the main drivers for this. But hey, we'll see what happens. It's gonna be a slow process, but hey, Cameron, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for writing the article. Everyone, please check it out. Like it's a great article. We've had heaps of involvement on it. I'll leave the link in the description below. It's on our website, obviously soccernomics.net. We'll have to have you on very, very soon again. Yeah. See if there's been any changes.
Yeah, I said if there's definitely an update, I'd love to write an article about it. And
let's do it. You can be dedicated to that.
A-League correspondent.
That's it. A-League correspondent. Done. All right, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll catch you next week for another episode of Soccernomics Podcast. See ya.
Catch ya.